All right, we are live here. Welcome on to this edition of Dunc'd On. I want to remind everyone to sign up for our newsletter. Link to that is in the show notes, and I'm going to have to say that again because we haven't actually started recording the podcast, so I apologize for those of you on YouTube. Let's do some faces here, though, Danny, and let's talk about our overall impressions of the last night of NBA Cup play last night.
I have one.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Both the Warriors and Rockets losing after being 3-0.
Our impressions of what the quarterfinal games are going to be looking like. All right, let's do the show. All right, welcome on to this edition of Dunc'd On. I want to remind everyone before we get started to please subscribe to our newsletter. You get Dan Feldman's Writing free 2 days per week. Link to that is in the show notes, and he'll usually follow up on some of the topics from the podcast and also everything that is happening around the league that day. But Danny, what are we going to do on this show? This is a chance to expand on something that we have done at times before in the past, but I wanted to make a whole show out of it.
It actually long ago was a part of our awards, but as many of you noticed, our awards was already over 3 hours, so we might as well not add anything more to it. And it was trends that will and won't continue. And I inadvertently misread, and mine are mostly on the won't side, but I can reframe one or two of them. But it's
I mean, most of these trends are interesting to talk about because they're probably not going to continue because they are such outliers. Like there's natural gravity to it, right?
Like I was thinking something about the Thunder defense, but that I will talk about that. You know, we'll have plenty of opportunities to discuss the Oklahoma City Thunder over the course of this year. And I think what I tried to do with this, a couple of different things. So one was I wanted to start tooling around with the really cool stuff at Sport Radar. And so I found a couple of, my goal was to find things that I hadn't seen in the same form. So it'll be things a little bit different. It could be like they're versions of stats that you've seen before, but the maybe the way they called it or something else was interesting. And then I had a couple that were like specific things that I wanted to look into and were point of research and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, well, let's get into it right now. I'm interested to see what you came up with. What is your first trend that will or will not continue?
It's one that will not. And something, I brought this up a couple of times on the pod, but I've been fascinated by it, is that there currently are 6 teams that are top 10 on cleaning the glass in both offensive rating and defensive rating. And I wanted to look up, well, what has that been in previous years? I didn't do date-to-date comparisons. I did year-to-year, but because I'm thinking more of this, whether this is an annual trend or not. And you would think that because of the tanking at the end of the year and everything else, you know, a lot of times what happens is some teams just fall off and some teams get those benefits. But 6 is a lot. And so when I looked through it, last year there were only 4 teams that were top 10 in both. And 2 of those 10 were 9th or 10th on their worst side of the floor. And then in New York in particular, they were 10th on defense and they were a razor's edge away from being 11th. But they were, you know, top 10 in both. And then in 22-23, there were only 3 teams. And so I think I have a couple operating theories on it. One of them is the slow starts for teams like the Bucks and the Sixers. And so you have teams that potentially could have made some noise on one end or both not being there. But I also do think that there's an argument that this is a top heavier league this year than it might have been in prior.
No, I do think that's a pretty good argument. And then you also have a few teams that are terrible, which helps it be a top heavy league as well. So yeah, I mean, I think there are. So what are those teams that fall into this category?
That is good to have out there. Okay, so there, as I mentioned, there are 6. The Celtics, they're 2nd in offense and 10th in defense. I actually think they're going to improve on defense. OKC, 7th on offense, 1st on defense. Cleveland, 3rd on offense, 7th on defense. Memphis, 5th on offense, 6th on defense. The Rockets are 10th on offense, 3rd on defense. And the Dallas Mavericks are 4th on offense and 8th on defense.
Yeah, that is very interesting. And Yeah, you have, and then there's some other teams like, maybe they could join this exalted group as well. I guess there are not very many that are close to being
I mean, in some ways, the
both.
Warriors are, but because they had this really strong defensive start, and maybe they'll be a little bit better offensively. My instinct is they're not going to be a top 10 offense.
Yeah, I mean, if they could just play Steph Curry a little bit more, maybe they would be, because the numbers with him on the floor are still pretty good. But
Yeah.
but we're right back to where we've always been. With the
I
Golden
mean,
State Warriors. Last year was the aberration.
Minnesota is a top 10 offense. Does that seem too lofty?
Minnesota. Oh, as a top 10 offense, yeah, because they're 18th.
They're
right
18th
now.
right now.
Maybe. If some of these guys who have really struggled could start, like Conley, DiVincenzo, could start to play a little bit better. But they're not like a great passing team. Usually, to be a good offense, you got to be a great passing team. Or
and actually, a stat that I hadn't pulled on this was I was really struck. I was looking at Unpredictable for some stuff, and Minnesota has super slow time to shoot, like off of a live rebound, all those sorts of things. And I was like, oh, that seems a little bit interesting. And then they were exactly the same last year. And that's something that is, I want to do this for 15-60 at some point, a structural kind of flaw within their team. Because when you really think about it, Minnesota doesn't really have that many guys that can push the pace with the ball in their hands. And that's some low-hanging fruit, even though they have some athletes, that is going to be left on the table.
Okay. So your hypothesis then about whether these 6 teams that are top 10 in offense and defense will continue is
that it will go down. Historically, that's been the case. I do think that it might be that it's more than last year, but I don't think it's going to be 6.
Yeah, because historically, that's kind of your bar for being a championship contender. Are there 6 championship contenders? Maybe not. It's of those teams, right? So Boston, I think they're a pretty good bet to stay in it. I mean, they're going to be a top 10 offense unless the world ends. Defense, we'll see, right? Like if Porzingis gets injured again, I could see them maybe not being a top 10 defense. Now, as other teams just sort of like get more injuries or just start tanking or whatever, like it might get easier for them on defense. But a lot of times teams too, with this sort of championship hangover aspect, defense is where you see the slippage, not on offense, because offense is fun and where you get paid. I think they're a pretty decent bet to do it, though. I mean, how are their fundamentals in terms of, like, is there anything that could progress or regress, as we say?
I generally like to look at opponent three-point shooting as kind of the shorthand there. And Boston, opponents are shooting worse than the league average, but not insanely so. So the league average right now is 36.5% from 3 on clean the glass. Celtics opponents are at 35.2. So that is close to a percent point and a half. But when you also consider that they've been without Kristaps Porzingis and like even Jaylen Brown has missed some time. So I think the way, and this will be a through line with some of these other teams, is that it's player availability. Like if they lose some important guys, like if Tatum misses some time, something like that, because they, like, for example, the non-Tatum minutes have historically gone well. But if you're losing, mostly because he's been very healthy, the non-Tatum minutes have been a few a game. If those become full games, then you have to replace him in the rotation.
The one thing I would point to that I think could get a lot better for them on the defensive end is they're 20th in field goal percentage allowed at the rim right now, 67.6%. And with the return of Porzingis, that hopefully is something that could improve. Al Horford can make a few plays there, but he's doing more switching on the perimeter. Like he's not like that great backline rim protector that Porzingis is. But of course, they could experience a little regression in opponent 3-point shooting as well. So I think they got a pretty decent chance to get there. OKC obviously will be there on defense. On offense, they aren't getting the line at all. I think that's going to change a little bit. They don't turn it over at all. Like that's more of a play style thing. Their offensive rebounding probably actually will get a little bit better.
I agree.
Than it's been. But they're Hartenstein is a good offensive center. He also doesn't really space the floor as much, so their drive might not be as amazing.
They're extremely shallow in terms of capable creators. As much as I like AJ Mitchell, like if Shea or Jalen Williams misses 20 games or so, it will be a challenge.
Well, and also like if like Alex Russo's been out, that's been part of how they're doing a little better. But this is also a team that just like if they're going up against a bad team, like they're going to score. But if Shea misses time, it's also they're kind of right on the borderline for me. I think between personnel, certain guys playing or not playing in terms of the rotation, and then also possibly an injury. But they're going to want the number 1 seed again. They're going to be. I think they're a decent bet to do it. Cleveland, I think they're going to go down a little bit on the offensive end. We're already starting to see that regression with some of the unsustainable shooting.
I have one of my points is about that. So I'll save that.
We'll save that. But I do think their defense, which is already 7th, could get better because they've had really bad opponent shooting luck from 3. In Memphis, it does seem like a total smoke and mirrors for them, kind of on either end. As I watched that Dallas game at times,
second luckiest team in terms of opponent shooting, including opponents shooting below 32% on corner threes so far this year. League average on corner threes is 38.5.
I'm going to say Memphis is not going to do it.
I agree.
I think one of those two ends is going to fall off enough. Houston, no, I don't believe they will be a top 10 offense. They're only at 10 right now, and they're.
I firmly believe they'll be a top 10 defense if they can stay remotely healthy.
Oh yeah. That feels like almost a lock. And Dallas, interestingly, they're up to 4th on offense now. Luka's back, looking good. 8th on defense. I could see them maybe dropping out of the top 10. Like that's their kind of borderline. To me.
This is going to sound wild when you consider where they are relative to the other teams. I think I'm 3rd most confident in Dallas doing it because remember how good the minutes, the splits were once they got Gafford, once they got back to 48 minutes at center, and they've already had some time missing Lively this season. He might.
Yeah, Lively gets hurt a lot though. Like he
does.
Can't play that many minutes. He's always got like some kind of nagging thing. It seems like so. Without him, I don't know that they can sustain it. It does seem like Klay Thompson's kind of getting minimized a little bit. That could help their defense, but Luka coming back probably won't. So that's why I think their defensive fastball is top 10 for sure. I'm just not sure they're going to be throwing that all the time.
Yeah,
okay, is that the end of that one?
I think so.
Okay, let's begin with my first offering here. Nikola Jokic's offensive rating is completely ridiculous. I should probably tell, as we're talking here, update with that exact number. But it was a 127 on-court offensive rating for Jokic, basically the highest that we've ever seen. So the question is whether or not that is going to continue. I mean, and then some of the differentials are crazy too. I'll just throw a few stats out here for you. The Nuggets have over a 30 offensive rating. I think it's like 34. When Jokic is on the floor compared to when he's off. They shoot 11.8% better from 3 when he is on the floor. They shoot 10.5% better from mid-range when he is on the floor. And they shoot 5.4% better at the rim when he is on.
Well, Nate, you want to hear one of my favorite Jokic stats like this with on-off? This is from Cleaning the Glass.
Okay.
The Nuggets take 5% more of their shots at the rim when Jokic is on the floor. 40.5% of their attempts when Jokic is on the floor are I think for Cleaning the Glass, it's within 4 feet of the basket. That is a just ludicrous number. And it's been roughly in that vicinity each of the last few years.
They also, their offensive rebound rate increases by 8 percentage points when Nikola Jokic is on the floor. Getting to the foul line, their free throw rate increases by 9.9 percentage points. They turn it over 3.8% percentage points fewer when he's on the floor. Just every single stat is a ridiculous change when he's on the floor. Although, again, part of that is how bad they are when he is off. But ultimately, we're not necessarily talking about the difference. What we are talking about here is the raw number, because that is basically the greatest of all time. And that usually when you see a number like that, I'm going to go ahead and predict that is going to regress. But I still think it's going to settle in the 123, 124 range. And that would be my prediction for what it is the rest of the year. So we may still see the highest of all time. Dan wrote about this in the daily dunks, just what that highest of all time number is. And I do think he will break that record this year. I think, which is just a deranged thing to talk about because, like, do they have another above average offensive player
with
on
how
the whole team?
With how Jamal Murray has played this year, I would
Well,
say,
Porter Jr. certainly is, but if you want to say on like a good offense, compare Jamal Murray as a number 2 and Michael Porter Jr. as a number 3, like those guys are, I would say, are underqualified for those roles on a good offense, and yet you're talking about with Nikola Jokic on the floor being the best offense of all time for any individual, and that's
at some point for 15 and 60, I might pull some of their player stats with Jokic on and Jokic off for like individual players because I think it just might be hilarious for what they do. But yeah, Michael Porter Jr. 60% true shooting on 20 usage so far this year.
Yeah, I mean, that's solid, and he is a guy who has good gravity, but it's nothing
again,
crazy.
we're using NBA.coms for this, but just as a point of reference with Cleaning the Glass because they have nice historical data that's easy for me to read. 129-1 with Jokic on, so if you filter out garbage time, it gets even better. 129-1, then that was 124.5 and 125.4 each of the past 2 years. So my instinct is it settles a little bit closer to what those numbers are because it's not like the Nuggets got better offensively, the non-Jokic players. And you could argue, they had Aaron Gordon out and they had to go to some weird lineups, but generally the Gordon-Watson swap to me is not a massive difference in respective like offensive efficiency. Let's put it that way. So I think this regresses because it has to. Like it would be possible, but it's just the gravity is that no one I bring this up all the time. Like, oh, nobody's done this in 20 years. Well, the reason nobody's done it in 20 years is because we're 1/4 of the way through the sample.
Yeah, and the Nuggets shooting from 3 also with Jokic on the floor, I think is unsustainable. In part because he for much of the year has been shooting over 50% from 3, which can't really continue.
Yeah, on that front, Jokic currently 52% on 4.1 per 36.
Yeah, I mean that's very good. Like I think that's one of his higher.
So, do you agree with me that will not continue?
I mean, I think it will continue. Or do you want to get that or
no?
Is that your someone from overseas?
No, I turned it off.
That phone is that is terrifying. That takes me back to being a paralegal in 2003. That's that ringer is like, the partner needs something. Like I had a comma out of place on this spreadsheet that I created for him.
I hope I turned it off, but I'm not sure boxes. I did. Yeah, I am not in my own home. So
yeah. I mean that's anyone calling on a landline for any reason is utterly terrifying.
Because we partially coordinated this, but we didn't want to spoil who our players were. I actually have a Jokic one too, but it's narrower. It's not this. It doesn't overlap with what yours is, and I think it'll be interesting to talk about the differences. So
okay, well let's take a couple of questions here.
Oh sure, of course.
Briefly, Maznef. Sorry if I mispronounced your name, Maz. Let's see here. Yeah, so he's. We'll take Rapstan actually. He said, because this is on topic from a couple of ideas ago, Minnesota getting to a top 10 offense would be a surprise. Yeah, I mean, they have kind of the raw talent to do it, but I wouldn't have predicted that before the season, and I think their start to the season doesn't give me much thought that can happen.
Yeah, I would say possible, but not likely or expected.
Yeah, and Buzz says, where are we at with the Wolves right now? He thinks they're better than their record, but
I think they're better than their record too, 100%. Yeah. But better than your record and being top 10 on both are two different things.
Yeah. I think they will be better. I think they'll make the playoffs. They're kind of going through it right now, so I think they'll shoot a little bit better, or they're just like a lot of these teams, just guys who haven't been effective are just going to play less. Because they have one of the deepest teams, but Conley getting it back together, I think is really important for them. They don't really have anyone else that can play in that role. Obviously, I'm not a huge Dillingham believer. Okay, what's your next one?
Okay, I said it was about Jokic, and so it'll be a little bit.
Sorry, and just to be clear, I'm not in the long term, I'm a Dillingham at least, I believe he could be a starting point guard. I'm just not a believer in him, replacing Mike Conley this year. So
no, that would be extremely uncommon, especially for a young guard. Incidentally, another guy who was like that, Mike Conley, a lifetime and a half ago when I was young. Okay, so this is a stat from Sport Radar.
Yeah.
While Nikola Jokic being the most efficient of the high volume clutch creators, I was inspired by the game on Tuesday night when they had this big 11-0 push to beat the Warriors at the end. Jokic, he has 46 possessions per Sport Radar, scoring and passing combined. That's close to the league high, which is actually Jason Tatum with 56. The Nuggets having 1.152 points per possession per Sport Radar on these possessions, which is middle of the road. And so what I'm thinking is, I think that specific part does better. I think that Jokic is the best clutch offensive player in the NBA. He's never won that award, but I think that he is that player and generates good shots. And remember, this is not just scoring, it's scoring and passing. And it's part of this is that Jokic, they actually did better in the same exact stat last year. But part of it is also just, if you believe, as I believe, and as you believe, that he is the best offensive player and that he's the best clutch player, you expect the Nuggets to be better than middle of the road on the possessions he has the ball.
Yeah, so this is the Nuggets clutch offensive rating with Jokic out there?
Well, no, it's more specifically from Sport Radar. It's the ones where he has a shot or a pass.
Ah, yes. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. So
no, I do think that, that does seem like it could go up.
Yeah, so for reference, so it's 1.15 right now. It's going to be 1.17 overall. So
yeah, and the pass on that's within, basically he passes to someone who shoots within 1 second.
I believe so, yes.
So, I think you're right on that. I think that can go up, and the clutch sample size is small, so we don't know that that's the case necessarily. You're going up against the opposing team's best defense. Generally, clutch offensive ratings are lower. Part of that is because one team is trying to bleed clock, and so that becomes a consideration in addition to getting the best shot throughout the possession, and it's harder to score right at the end of the clock when you're running it down. But I think the Nuggets, their overall offensive approach, moving the ball, less iso ball, the Murray-Jokic two-man game, all that is, I think, what makes them the best clutch offense in the league.
Yeah. So do you want to go next, or do you want me to do another?
No. Let's get to a huge elephant here, which is LeBron James's on-off.
Ooh.
And I wanted to get back into this again because the numbers are very, very stark with how much worse the Lakers have been. I haven't checked it actually since this last terrible game. Maybe I'll get that when you respond to this. But LeBron James does lead the entire league in a stat that you can look at on cleaning the glass.
Other than age?
Oh, you can look at that anywhere else too. But in terms of opponent shooting accuracy, LeBron James opponents shoot 9.8% better from three when he is on the court versus off. And yes, maybe that is a crazy number. And it's not even that they're shooting a crazy number, because this is not actually a great thing for the Lakers and Laker fans. You might be like, oh, well, that's because opponents are shooting so incredibly well when LeBron is on the floor. No, they're shooting like 39%, which is a good number, but it's not crazy. They're in the high 20s when LeBron is off the floor. And that's a big reason, in addition, obviously, that he and Davis stagger, why the Laker defense looks so much better when LeBron is off the floor. And I don't know that LeBron has had the highest energy level. I don't know that on a night-to-night basis he's a huge quality defensive player. But also, he's not, the reason why, his absence is not the reason opponents are shooting in the high 20s from three when he's off the floor. And so that makes you think, well, yeah, maybe that LeBron on number comes down a little bit from 39%, but the LeBron off number is going to really, really rise. So these crazy splits with him, I really hope, are not going to continue. I mean, his offensive game, though, is kind of the bigger problem that you're really concerned about, because he's just in terms of turnovers, not being able to generate shots at the rim. It's just really looking bad at the moment. So, I mean, some of these lines from his last couple of games, he was negative 28 in the Wolves game, 4-16 from the field with 6 turnovers and 4 assists. Against Utah, he really ramped it up, but he still was only 12 of 28 against them, 0 for 9 from 3. He hasn't made a three-pointer since November 26th. He's missed every three he's taken.
I think he needs to go 0 for in at least 2 attempts in their next game, which I believe is on Wednesday against the Heat, to have the record for the worst 0 for in a 5-game stretch in NBA history.
Whew. Yeah, that is pretty tough. So, and he did shoot way better last year, and the party line with that was that already finally got a chance to have an off season. This foot thing was really bothering him, but he also had the best shooting season of his career from 3. I don't know that he is like that level of 3-point shooter. He usually takes pretty difficult ones as well. Now, he's had some really good games earlier in the season, but that may have been propping up his numbers a little bit, and he hasn't been able to get to the basket nearly as well as in past years. So I think he could be a little bit better than he's been, and he's also been a little bit unlucky too in terms of the team shooting worse when he's on the floor. But of course, from 3, he has been making his 3, so that's been a big part of that. So I mean, I think it's going to get better. If you ask me, will the Lakers be better with LeBron on the floor or off the rest of the season, I would say better with him on. But the problem is that they also need to be, just in raw terms, really good with him on the floor. I don't know if that's coming, and I don't know if because they still need a number 1 perimeter offensive option. Like, we'll see whether he's capable of doing that. Again, I'm not going to write him off. There's talk that maybe he's getting a little bit tired. It was the second night of a brutal back-to-back. Utah to Minnesota is just an insane back-to-back. Going west to east, so you lose an hour as well, and you're flying 1,500 miles. I can't believe that even exists, honestly. That's probably beyond the pale. I don't recall ever seeing a mountain time zone to central time zone
and
back-to-back like that.
Just so we have this in the conversation, the minutes when Anthony Davis is on specifically and LeBron is off, 429 clean the glass possessions, plus 12 net rating, 123.3 offensive rating is elite. And then their 111.4 defensive rating is better than average, but not ridiculous. But as you mentioned, like the overall non-LeBron numbers, that is heavily fueled by 30% in that sample of opponent shots being made threes, or opponents making 30% of their threes. And weirdly, in those minutes, Lakers opponents are shooting 70.4% at the rim, which is a really high number. That's not what you want as the Lakers. So maybe that part can, maybe you can get a regression within the overall shift the other way.
Let's hit a couple of these questions here. So some pretty good ones. Bob says, Nate's view on Houston was they're going to take time to trial the things to see what works and kind of discovering the alchemy. And he says, is figuring it out why they've overperformed? Yes, I would say that's right. Like Cam Whitmore is not playing at all, right? Like we thought he would be out there. I mean, certainly Amen Thompson and Tari Eason coming in and just being like very good NBA rotation players. You didn't know that was going to happen for sure, particularly on the defensive end.
Well, and I would say also you and I are both optimistic about Reed Shepherd as a prospect, but Ime Udoka's just not playing him that much. And so they're not giving him really anything other than like the bare bones Fred VanVleet backup minutes and all that kind of stuff. Also,
and hopefully the not playing Şengün in crunch time thing, hopefully they're done with that too, because he's like, they're basically, they're like, he's another one of these guys where they're like 15 points per 100 better on offense when he's playing. So yeah, I think they've found a formula. They found guys who are really going to execute. Even Jalen Green, who is someone we wondered about, and his individual numbers haven't been great, but just having him as an innings eater in that role, he comes in with the second unit and is kind of the main guy there to keep them at least like semi afloat. Like they have an intentionality and a theory towards everything that they're doing, other than some of the weird Jock Landale stuff, which they went away from against OKC because they were just like, they're going small. We need to play Jabari at center. Like they need to get something out of Steven Adams and Jock Landale, but I also think more Jabari at center can be better for both him and the team, and also maybe let you get some of the other young guys on the wing in. But that's very much nitpicking. And yeah, this is a team that I think has discovered what its identity is going to be. Crunch time, it's going to be the Van Vliet, Şengün interaction. So I think that is a really good point there by Bob.
From Maznef, would love your opinion on the advanced analytics trend with on-off became an even bigger staple player evaluations. How effective are they? How do you contextualize them? And I mean, you see Nate and I trying to contextualize these a lot. Like, sure. That is something that is very important in the podcast. And the way I generally feel is the more tools, the better. And it puts onus on whoever wants to use them to understand how to use them. And I mean, that was even true going back. Like, I mean, I taught, like Hollinger with PER, like it would need to be like, well, there's certain players that can do, that can like, this can reflect it differently. And so it's good to have, and it will lead to things. But you like, for example, like when we picked our all NBAs and all that stuff, we didn't just go like, okay, here are the top 5 people in EPM or estimated wins built off of EPM. They're the 5 best players in the league this year. It's like, well, what do we think that this all-in-one or Raptor or anything else, what do we think they're getting right? What do we think they're getting wrong? And one of the elements of that I talk about a lot is, and this gets into a question somebody asked about D'Angelo Russell, is apportioning credit. So it is not the same thing if your team is you have the biggest on-off differential. That doesn't mean you're the reason for it. It means that you are on the floor for it. And so you could get into usage and defensive role and importance and all the stuff. So
you got to use your brain, right? Like this stat we're talking about, the on-court offensive rating, Christian Braun is really high in that stat. Does that mean that Christian Braun is one of the best offensive players in basketball? No, right? Like you combine it with, we watch the game, we see what Nikola Jokic does. Everyone, that he's the engine of everything. So you could probably say that, yeah, the Nuggets playing well on offense at a record rate when he's out there is real to some extent. Then you kind of regress it by what are some numbers that we know are unsustainable, right? Like, I mean, that's the biggest thing, is just having an idea of the context of all these stats, where like, all right, to take a ridiculous example, Ty Jerome is shooting 52% from 3. No one on any kind of volume has ever shot over 50% other than Steve Kerr with the shorter line back in like 1997, and that was even pretty low volume by modern standards. So you're like, hey, this is unsustainable. This is just not going to happen. Or if it's a guy who just some little guard is allowing really low shooting at the rim, you're like, yeah, that's probably not going to sustain. I need to see a huge sample to think that, oh yeah, this actually matters, that this 6'2" guard is like a good rim protector, and almost invariably those stats will regress. So basically the way I like to approach it is, the more ridiculous it seems, the more evidence that I need. Extraordinary claims need extraordinary evidence, right?
Yeah,
Whereas
Nikola
Jokic is the best offensive player in basketball. Yeah, okay, I can very much get behind that. We've had a lot of evidence to that. And then specifically with respect to the on-off stuff, again, like that's, I think there's a couple of things you can look at. One is just, hey, this has happened. They were better with this guy on the floor. How much of that credit goes to one player or another, right? Like, I'm just on defense, I'm not going to give the little guard who doesn't really do anything on film much credit for a really good defensive rating. I'm going to give Victor Wembanyama a lot of credit for that. Mm-hmm. Where it's Nikola Jokic, yeah, Christian Braun finished in transition a little bit. He's making open threes pretty well. But no, like he's just, kind of a slightly below average offensive 2 guard. Like, we're not going to give him the credit for this. So it's just seeing the stat and then use your brain to evaluate that. And obviously with experience and knowing the sort of stats that can or cannot continue, that's the whole reason we're doing this show. But hopefully it gives you a little window into our process.
Well, and Nate, I think that's actually a good transition into my next one, which is that this is another Sport Radar one. The Sacramento Kings have been the absolute worst team in the league defending plays involving picks. So that does not necessarily mean like a pick and roll in the traditional sense, as I'm understanding Sport Radar's use of the term.
No, yeah, that is pick and rolls actually. Yes.
Okay.
So you click on like the picks.
Yes.
Column. Yeah. In talking to them specifically, they said, yeah, picks means on ball picks.
Okay. On ball picks. So
yeah.
So I started with that, and I'm like, okay, that could continue. The Kings, they play some limited defenders, including their center, of course. But what I found really fascinating as I started digging into this further, and this is again part of the fun of Sport Radar, is within this sample, Kings' opponent shot distribution off of these picks is actually really good. Opponents are taking the second fewest shots at the rim, just 9.3 of plays involving those picks and get a shot at the rim, which are the most valuable shots in the league. And the median is roughly 13%. And a couple of these other things, like they're by and large, there's some stuff with 3-pointers that you don't like. But other than that, it's pretty good. But here's the thing that's absolutely mind-blowing. You have 30 teams in the league, and they're all defending picks. Kings' opponents so far this year have the second best or first best points per possession at the rim, non-paint twos outside the paint, and threes. They're second or worse second or higher, I guess you'd say, in all four of those. And I just found that mind-blowing. Like, you'd assume that there'd be something somewhere. And no, they're just making every single shot at every single range if it involves a pick.
That is interesting. And I think maybe you can point to some of that for the way that they generally have Domantas Sabonis defend, which is out on the floor, putting 2 on the ball. That's probably the big reason why they're not allowing direct plays at the rim. Like, they're double teaming the ball, and it's hard to throw a pass for a layup when you are getting double teamed right at the rim. Right on the perimeter, it's hard to throw a pass right to the rim. But if you do, then it's because the guy is wide open and he's going to get a dunk immediately, slipping to the basket where there wasn't help. So that's an interesting idea. And then you would also say, well, if you got 2 on the ball, they can probably throw it to someone who's going to be pretty open immediately. But certainly the fact that they're making jumpers at that sort of a level.
And I have one more stat on that.
Yeah, sure.
The median on 3-pointers out of a pick in the league is 1.05 points per possession. The Kings are allowing 1.45 points per possession. So that's almost half a point per shot more than the league average.
All right. My next one here is going to be Cam Thomas's shooting this season. He's at 60% true shooting, and he's doing pretty well in terms of actually making shots. Like, previously he generates really hard shots. He is absolutely, but he hasn't made them that much better than you would have expected. So as of right now, Cam Thomas is just about at the bottom of the league in what we call our simple shot quality metric, which says, where was this shot on the floor taken? Was it contested or uncontested? What would the average player in the league shoot on that? That metric for Cam Thomas is 48.4%, which is among high volume players, one of the worst in the league. It generally is high volume players who are going to have a really low number in that because they're taking the contested shots.
Well, can I give you a basketball reference stat on that?
Yeah.
Only about 50% of Cam Thomas's 2s and his 3s are assisted. And so that 3-point number is extremely low. That 2-point number, it depends on the player, but he, that's kind of your offensive role, but he's basically taking pull-up 3s most of the time.
Yeah. So Brandon Ingram historically is, and again, this year is just the worst in that number, 47%. And both Ingram and Thomas shoot about the same percentage better than would be expected. So we expect field goal percentage 48.4% for Cam Thomas, but he shoots 6.0% better on those shots than expected. So his field goal percentage is actually kind of right around the league average, which is pretty good for him. 76% of his shots are self-created. So by our metrics, he's added 35.5 points just with the making of the difficult shots that he creates, as opposed to generating good quality shots. So is that going to continue? I'm going to say it's going to regress a little bit. He also is shooting 5.7% better from 3 than would be expected, 39%. I just don't think that Cam Thomas is quite that level of 3-point shooter. I could buy it a little bit more from mid-range. I think that's going to regress. He's taken 3s that you would expect to go in 33% of the time. He's making 39%. That is really tough.
On the 2s, Thomas deserves credit for honing his shot selection. He's taking more shots around the basket. He's taking more 3s this year than in prior years. But he's taking about 30% of his shots are 2s away from the basket. Sorry, it's closer to 25. That's to be charitable to Cam Thomas. He's shooting over 50% on those. Most guys don't. Most guys aren't DeMar DeRozan there. So I would expect that part to regress because very few guys do that. And I don't think of Cam Thomas, particularly because he doesn't have height. Some of the guys like Giannis has been weirdly good on those shots this year too. They have height. They can get it off. Like Cam Thomas, it's a different kind of thing.
Here's one more for you that says it's going to regress. In his career, Cam Thomas shoots 33% on contested three-pointers, which actually is well above league average. Contested three-pointers, the median is 32.1%. So even 33% is a good number on contested three-pointers. This year, though, he is shooting 40.6% on contested three-pointers, which, given the volume that he has, is a crazy number. There are a few of these out here that are just totally ridiculous. Like Peyton Pritchard is shooting 46.5% on contested threes. But his career number there is 37%, which is also a absolutely ridiculous number. So, I think Cam Thomas, his three-point shooting in particular, unless his shot quality improves, which I'm guessing it probably won't, he's also out with a hamstring, so we won't get the answer to this question for a little bit. But I think he's going to experience some reasonably significant regression on that in particular.
Well, we could stay along that general thread, and I agree with you on your assessment overall there with Cam Thomas. The Cleveland Cavaliers are currently shooting 40.2% from three on the season. No team has made over 39% of their threes since the 2020/21 Clippers. Remember, that was a COVID year. And
empty arenas.
Empty arenas.
Yeah,
and
actually, I think like Seth noted this earlier. His research showed, particularly in the corners, not having people like right behind you in the corners actually like accounted for a couple of percentage points of improved corner shooting. So I think a lot of people would point to like the shooting background. I think it's more just not having like that feeling that there's somebody behind you and you don't have space might have actually helped guys make from the corner more.
Yeah. And so just to put that in further context, there have been 11 total team seasons where a team has shot over 40% for a year. But if I'm counting correctly, an outright majority of them occur either during the COVID year or when the three-point line was moved in, because there isn't always the full context on that. And so then you get it down to this narrow group. And I will, of the 38 total team seasons, over 39% in the last 10 years, the only teams to do it in a non-COVID year, and I'm going to give you this list. I think you'll enjoy this list of teams.
I can't wait for this, actually. I've been waiting with bated breath for this.
14-15 Warriors, 15-16 Warriors, 17-18 Warriors. So they didn't do it in 16-17. And then at around the same time, the 16-17 Spurs and the 18-19 Spurs. So in the last 10 years, the only 5 teams who have done it are Warriors teams or Spurs teams.
Yeah, and those Spurs teams had a much different approach. They were kind of they're a little slow to transition towards the modern three-point volumes, but their approach was always, we're only going to let our good three-point shooters shoot threes, right? Like that was, think of like DeJounte Murray, they didn't even let him shoot threes for like 4 years, right? So it was like, that was kind of their approach. So it was all, Bryn Forbes taking these threes, basically.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm not saying, so what I'm saying is not only will Cleveland fall below 40, I think they'll fall below 39, just because to me, this is an extreme group. You think about those teams, the Spurs in terms of their shot selection and the Warriors in terms of the quality of shooters that they had, that you don't really replicate. And so this Cavs team has been preposterously good on three-point shooting, and you could get into even the sub-splits of team created and everything else. It's not, I try not to do as many with this, but because Cleveland is such an important part of the story of the season so far, that this isn't going to continue because they're not the 14-15 Warriors.
All right, a few more things that I can give you here on that. Cleveland is currently, if you just take everyone's career three-point shooting weighted by volume on the Cavs, they are shooting 3.3 percentage points better than all of these guys combined career three-point shooting. That would be a massive increase for an entire team. They are shooting right now 47.1% on uncontested threes as a team. That is a ridiculous number of like the absolute best shooters in the league. Like guys don't get over 50% on that. Like the best shooters in the league over the course of a season don't get over 50% on shooting on uncontested threes. 47.1%. Next highest is the Knicks at is Golden State actually at 43.3% shooting on uncontested threes. So yeah, again, if you look at, we also have a number called weighted uncontested free field goal percentage, which basically accounts for what you would expect these shooters to shoot on uncontested threes based on their history, and they are shooting 7 percentage points better. It would still be a really good number. 40.2% is a very good number to shoot on uncontested threes. But so they're going to see some shooting regression for sure. And actually, they don't, in terms of their shot mix, Garland, Mitchell, Ty Jerome shoots off the dribble. Like they shoot more threes off the dribble than you might expect. Another crazy number for them is that on self-created threes, so this is basically threes off the dribble with greater than 2 seconds of touch time, 42%. That is another utterly deranged number that just can never possibly continue. I'm shocked even that they
could do it over 20
this high after a quarter of the season.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And so you appreciate it while it's here.
They are also shooting 59% from 2. That is much more sustainable.
Sure, because those shots come from a different place and there can be a lot. Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with you there.
Yeah, and they're taking very few long twos relative to the league average. So their shot mix is very good. They're getting a lot of finishing around the rim. Their contested finishing is really good, just about the top of the league there. They're second in the league in that metric. So they're going to continue to be a really good offense. But yeah, this three-point shooting cannot continue. It just is not going to.
I have one more. If you're
well, let me get to one more for myself as well. Well, yeah, actually, it's your turn, isn't it? Oh no,
I did the Cavs.
Oh yeah,
well, we kind of both did the Cavs, so it's it's your choice. If we each have one more, you can decide.
Let's do this one. The Wizards being this bad.
I nearly did that.
What'd you say?
I nearly did that. I considered it.
Will it or won't it continue? And I think they're a negative 17 in cleaning the glass.
17.7 now.
Oh, yeah, which is it's during a non-tanking portion of the season is about as low as I can remember. But when you have a tanking-esque roster out there during the portion of the season when everyone else is trying to be competitive, it can certainly be a problem. Those Portland teams, they would be like a negative 18 after the All-Star break. You'll see that sort of a number, like some of the OKC back when they were tanking, and like that was probably 21-22 or something. But yeah, them continuing to be this bad during the competitive portion. A few other things we could throw out there. Their 103.8 offensive rating is 1.4 points below number 29 New Orleans.
And it's 10 points per 100 possessions worse than the league average.
Yes, and they are also 4.2 points worse than number 28 Portland. And New Orleans has been so bad just because they've been so incredibly injured. Then their defense is also
1.6.
Yeah, 1.6 worse than number 29 New Orleans. It's you got to be pretty bad on offense and defense to be negative 17.7 and negative 14.7 as those two teams are. Can they, Danny, continue to be this awful?
They can, but I don't expect that they will. I mean, Malcolm Brogdon did just get hurt again. I haven't heard how long of an absence this is going to be, but I think it might. Hopefully, it's short-lived. I think he just left that game early. But it's because the fundamental question that I have for the Wizards is just kind of like, do they have players on this roster who can play that they're just not giving minutes to right now? And I'm genuinely unsure. And I know that,
I mean, the rookies have got to get a little better, right? Like maybe that's your hope.
And I mean, there's definitely already some chatter about Valanciunas getting traded. We know that LeBron was interested in him at one point. And Oof, would it be? I mean, we've seen this a couple times over the years where like players that you and I think aren't good go to high profile situations. That would be a juicy one for a number of different reasons. But I don't, like, okay, so then they're going to replace him with somebody else and all that type of stuff. So I think they can't be this bad because almost nobody ever has been. But the ways for them to be better are more just like that sort of regression rather than underutilizing their good players, with the exception potentially of Brogdon.
So their 2-point shooting is actually not that terrible. They're at 52.7% from 2, and that's not like an awesome number necessarily, but by any means, but it's that's like actually kind of right about league average. They finish pretty poorly at the rim, but that happens. They don't shoot very well on long twos, but the big problem is they just cannot make a three. They are shooting 31% from 3.
Oh no!
They are shooting 31.1% on uncontested threes. But the bigger problem is the weighted career uncontested 3 field goal percentage. Again, some of these are for rookies. I think that number has regressed back to the mean a little bit when the sample size is small enough. Is at 33.1%. So you would expect the guys on this team to be shooting 33% on uncontested threes. I mean, that is truly awful. Again, there's some rookies in there like Sarr that just, hopefully they'll either get better or stop taking them. And then the other thing that's fascinating is they have a pretty high percentage of their threes coming as uncontested, but they just can't make them.
Well, and I think part of it is the idea of their like challenge shots, where if the team opponent thinks that this guy can't shoot, well,
challenged in the sense that they are challenged to make them, not that they are challenged in the sense that they are being contested.
Correct. And so the idea is that everyone knows these are bad shooters. They're going to let them shoot to take away these other things, and that bet is working.
So they are actually above average in self-created threes. Like Jordan Poole is the one guy who can make a shot on this team. Like that's a lot of that is him shooting threes off the dribble. But then the team created 3-pointers is 29.9%. So next time you see Jordan Poole just pull up from like 35 off the dribble, remember that number. And then, I think the defense can get a little bit better just because these rookies will get some more experience than they had. But
I mean, this is a truly wild stat for me. The Washington Wizards are often, but not always, starting 3 rookies, Bub Carrington and Alex Sarr, and then sometimes Keyshawn George. All 3 of those rookies have an EPM of -4 or worse. So Keyshawn George is at -4, Carrington at -4.6, Sarr at -5.3.
Yeah. I heard all this buzz that the 2024 draft wasn't going to be that great.
And by the way, no Wizard has a positive EPM right now. Jordan Poole has a -0, so he's very close, but no one has a positive.
A couple more questions here we can take. How about the trend of using the offhand as a weapon to swipe away defenders while any contact in the driving player is a foul? Yeah, I mean, I went on yet another rant about that on yesterday's Dunc'd On Prime show. By the way, reminder to subscribe to that Dan Feldman newsletter.
I can answer this one briefly. The Rap Stallion said that the Wizards should just cut Kuzma and Poole. I mean, I don't think that. So the idea is that that they're being corrosive. First of all, with Poole, I mean, he's taking shots that they need, and you want some creators on the floor to kind of set things up for them.
I don't know that Poole has a bad attitude either. He actually is like a really, really hard worker.
And Kuzma takes bad shots. He plays selfishly, in my opinion. I said he was the least serious player in the NBA last year. But what a player is to a team is often more nuanced and complicated than that. And also, but do I think they should consider trading him? Yes, absolutely. Of course they should. And especially if for whatever reason Portland is being reluctant to trade Jeremy Grant. If there are teams that want a forward and you have a forward and you get interest, hell yeah, make a trade.
Yeah, I mean, how this trend could be reversed? It's going to take some time, a
And get
lot
better
of time,
players. Get better players. I mean,
a lot of time. Um, yeah, but yeah, using the offhand as a weapon. I mean, that's like,
ugh.
especially like the forearm too. Like, why is the offensive player allowed to put his forearm facing the basket on the defender, but the defender can't put his forearm on the offensive player? Like
Right. Like
I don't understand why that is the case.
it's so to me the philosophical point here is, are you generating an unfair advantage? And so I think that they're doing a better job taking away the unfair advantages that defenses get. Like, you can't just shove away a guy for a rebound, and actually they do a pretty good job on both ends for that. I consider the off arm the same, a sibling of that, and so I would love to see the league treat it the way that I want them to treat it, and I think that would clean up a lot of this.
Yeah, well, and then the one that's really killing me too. I mean, number one, off the dribble. Okay, while you're dribbling, you can have your opposite hand up. Okay, like that's, but like that also, like, not only are you pushing guys away, but it basically expands the cone in which you can protect your dribble and not have to worry about getting it stolen. But then the one that absolutely kills me is guys pick the ball up with two hands, and then they'll take one hand and tuck the ball under their ribs and then bash out with the other hand after they've already picked the ball up to shove a guy away and then put their hand back in the ball and finish. Like, that's just utterly ridiculous. Like, once you pick the ball up, to take your hand off the ball so you can shove somebody is just, that's like, and everyone is teaching it now. Like, of course you should do that if you can get away with it. Like, that's you're not playing offense unless you're doing that move. Yeah, I mean, it's gotten so ridiculous that, like, I can't even come up with the guys who do it the most anymore. It's like,
it's just
everyone does it now. Okay, what's your last one, Dave?
I'll do my last one. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this one, but I do think it's fascinating. Pascal Siakam, this is using Sport Radar. Pascal Siakam is 5th in the NBA in total post-ups so far this year, 101 total. And he is 3rd among high-volume players and 1st among really high-volume players, so guys who have more than 40 attempts, more than 40 post-ups, in points per possession. Pascal Siakam, 1.257 points per possession on post-ups. And using the same definition of a post-up, last year, the best of the high-volume guys was Joel Embiid at 1.2. So he's a half a point per possession, or sorry, 0.5 of a point per 100. Or yeah, anyway, you got it right. Per better than Embiid was last year. And so two things about this are interesting. One of them is Siakam so he's at 4.3 post-ups so far this year, was at 3 last year. So his post-up rate has gone higher, and he had a more normal but still good at points per possession. So one part of this is like, yeah, that's almost definitely going to regress, but it's like, oh God, do the Pacers need something more to go wrong on this team?
Yeah, I think at least a lot of these are, quick seals in transition. Tyrese Halliburton struggles, but he's still a really good entry passer. So they look for those sorts of plays for him against a mismatch. They're not doing it as much.
And Siakam plays super hard, so he can generate those more than the average guy.
Yeah, so that's, I think that it'll still continue to be pretty good, but yeah, that number is obviously not sustainable at all. Okay, here's my last one. This is another one we can do pretty quickly here. Milwaukee Bucks opponents shoot 11.4 percentage points better at the rim when Giannis Antetokounmpo is on the floor versus off.
And that's probably a big part of the story data-wise for why the Bucks defense has been so bad when Brook Lopez has been off the floor.
Has been off the floor.
Yes.
Yeah. So now the raw numbers are not that crazy with just Giannis on the floor and no Brook Lopez. There's opponents are shooting 66% at the rim. That's that's an average number. So that's actually, it's really more about what happens in the Lopez on Giannis off minutes that makes that number. And also, like, those guys basically never get hurt. At least Brook Lopez apparently somehow doesn't. He missed an entire season with a back injury at age 34, and then he turned into a total Iron Man. And so it's the Lopez on, Giannis off minutes.
Do you want to know the clean the glass split on that? I have it.
Yes, I have it too, but please.
Opponents are making 54.1% of their shots inside 4 feet when Brook Lopez is on the floor and Giannis Antetokounmpo is off.
Yeah, and that is, again, a crazy low number. Your average number is going to be basically in the mid-60s. So they're actually about average when Giannis is on the floor without Lopez, but they're crazy good. That number is going to be unsustainable, though, throughout the course of the season with just Lopez on and no Giannis. 54% is, I've seen only a couple of times that a full season number has gotten to that point with those Rudy Gobert Jazz teams in terms of when he was on the floor. They'd shoot around 54%. I don't think that this Bucks team is going to be able to sustain that necessarily. So Giannis has disappointed to me as a rim protector these last couple of years, but that number is really more about how good the Bucks are when he's off the floor, at least have been, rather than that it's just so terrible. Like, you can live with 65% for this team if their offense can start to look good when Brook Lopez is off the floor. If you're allowing league average shooting at the rim with Giannis and Bobby Portis, I think you can still feel okay.
And the Giannis contest numbers are particularly compelling because one of the other things that the Bucks have done terribly in the Lopez off Giannis on minutes is transition defense. They're towards the bottom of the league in both opponent transition frequency and opponent transition success, like points per possession. And so some of that is they're getting a lot of shots around the basket. They're getting all this stuff in transition when Giannis isn't there. But if the contest numbers are there, generally speaking, those are not going to be as high quality for us.
All right, let's clean up here. Any other comments we got to hit on?
Last I checked, we were pretty good.
Okay. What is Zion's trade value? Probably zero at this point. Zero, nada, whatever.
It's really low.
It doesn't exist.
I agree with the reporting. I think Shams had this, that the Pelicans are not expected at this point to waive Zion, whose contract may be either fully non-guaranteed or lightly guaranteed for next year, because it's probably, unless they know something, this is probably too early for it. But as you've said before, like, if you cut Zion, then you're just going in a fundamentally different direction.
Yeah, they're on the hook, I believe, for, even if they cut him right now, they still would be on the hook for 40% next year of that. Well,
so they might actually, I'd have to be interested in the numbers on this. They might actually want to wait in that circumstance, because I think I would depend on the legalese on some of the triggers, because if you cut him when the season isn't completed, like, I'd be very interested in that.
Will Brook Lopez make the Hall of Fame? No, I don't think. He's never had an All-Star appearance, I don't think.
And he hasn't done enough internationally. Like, that's the other. Sometimes you see surprising players.
Yeah, or if he's like won a college championship or something, then maybe you could see it. Certainly, he will go down, I would guess, as one of the most underrated players.
And one of the most fascinating player development journeys in modern NBA history.
Yeah, but even with my having the conception of him that I have, and just the incredible value that archetype provides of shooting on one end and rim protection on the other, and he, in some ways, he has kind of made Giannis Antetokounmpo to be like the incredible player that he's been. Not that Giannis can't be good without him, but you need a shooting big next to him, and if it's going to be Bobby Portis, then you're not going to stop anybody. So, but yeah, even you could argue maybe that Brook Lopez has been a top 30 or 40 player in basketball in some of these best seasons. He's been around since 2008, unbelievably. But yeah, that's that for my standard of the Hall of Fame. I think it's too low, and then even with the low standard, I think it's going to be some points per game guy from the 90s over him. People talk about Al Horford making it.
2 college rings.
Yeah, 2 college rings. He won a championship, which Lopez has too, obviously, but. Like, Al Horford made some all-star teams, and it was also really good for a lot longer.
And of course, Al Horford was a little sad. Dan did mention this in his Paul Millsap write-up, was that he was also importantly 1/5 of the Eastern Conference Players of the Month one time.
So the Zion trade value, I think it's like, I don't think anybody really, like, they wouldn't get something positive for it unless they get sent back something even worse. And there's just no reason for New Orleans to do that. Would we trade either or both Lakers picks for a non-all-star, I think like Brandon Ingram or Zach LaVine? No, because LeBron just hasn't looked good enough this year.
Well, and not only that, but those kind of guys aren't exactly what they need for the right fit, for like a perfect kind of guy, maybe. But Ingram, he doesn't take the defense. He's sort of like, he's a better version of what they kind of want from Rui Hachimura, but he's not better enough.
Yeah, and to trade one of those picks for like a PJ Washington type, at least what Washington has been in Dallas. I didn't think he was that. Dallas gets a lot of credit for identifying him as someone that they could go get, who had more defensive ability than I anticipated. But like that's the type of guy I think they need. And then you just, but LeBron has to show more before I think I would throw anything at this team, honestly. Yeah. Okay, I think that's.
And just to briefly clarify for Tyson Brady, it wasn't just that the Hawks won Player of the Week. The 5 of them won Player of the Month in what month was that? It was January of 2015. God, that was a wild time.
Yeah, they won 60 games. That team. Miles, we'll close on this one. Miles says. 11 of the 11 best records in the league, 8 of a top defense. Is that a sign of shift in the importance of offense in the modern game? I wouldn't say so at the championship level, but I would say so maybe during the regular season as a continuation of this trend we talked about of just having more depth, more athleticism, a certain floor to your effort level and your defense every night. If you think of the formula of like Orlando or Houston or OKC obviously has the offensive players too, but they do it on the defensive end. Golden State looked like they might be following that formula without DeAnthony Melton and some of the struggles with their young guys. They haven't quite been able to get there yet. Still relying on Steph Curry so much offense.
I want to throw one stat out there.
Yeah.
The top 7 teams in the entire NBA net rating all have a top 10 offense. So all of them have a top 10 offense. All but one have a top 10 defense because as
wait, so Orlando is a top 10 offense?
Orlando's not top 10 in net rating right now, or not top 10.
Oh yeah, well I guess they only lost by 15 last night, but although they made some back in garbage time, so they were probably it probably was like a minus 30 points for them in terms of cleaning the glasses formulation. Yeah, so I think, but I do think still like there's. Like it is a formula that it can, I think, be more successful in the regular season than it's been in the past, because it's just like all these teams with all the stars, the Philly model, like guys are just going to be out. Like you're not going to be able to just rely on superstars to come out there and dominate and lift a team every single night, maybe the way you would have in the past. So like having that more depth-based, effort-based, the floor game, the offensive rebounding is way more important now than it was 5 years ago, as an example, right? Houston is doing it on the offensive end with offensive rebounding. Now that's a little bit outside the scope of the question because you talked about defense, but that's kind of another thing where it's like, yeah, we can maybe find this a little bit cheaper. We can build some depth and be good in the regular season by controlling these non-shooting, non-shot creation aspects of the game. All right, that was fun. We'll have to check back in on some of these in like a month or two and come up with some new ones. But thanks so much for joining us. Again, a reminder, sign up if you are listening to the public show for that 2-day-a-week email newsletter with the link in the show notes from Dan Feldman, our daily dunks. And also, of course, if you want to get Danny's and my podcasting 5 days a week and every Hollinger and Duncan, you can also sign up for Dunc'd On Prime and get Dan 5 days a week as well. Talk to you all soon.